the wonderful Reem.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Very pleased to be here in my first day. Thank you so much to Labour Women's Declaration for the invitation, and also I'm very pleased to be here with these lovely ladies on a very important topic. I'm going to be speaking to 4 issues. One is the commitment to have violence against women and girls. The other is the meaning of sex, also in international law. The third is the caste review, and also with that the plans to ban conversion therapies. If you allow me, I'm going to sit down also because I have a piece of paper that has a small font. So I will be speaking to that. I'm just going to go for it. Yeah. So with regards to having male violence against women, as you know, and as was said, I was in the UK on an official visit back in February. And the report of that visit will still come out in June, which you might think may be a long time from now. But in a way, it's also a good thing because we had a change of government. And also I will be able to take stock of everything that has happened since my visit. It is definitely welcome that Labour government has committed to halving violence against women and girls. I do feel strongly, though, that all governments, including Labour government, must really walk that talk and must commit to that at the highest level, consider this really a priority. As I've said in my end of statement after the visit to the UK, the UK is very much a leader when it comes to issues of discrimination and violence. It has a robust legal framework. It has a very also active and vibrant civil society organizations and feminist movement. And in that way also I very much agree that you have really set an example and are looked to really around the world on what is possible when a robust legal framework and activism and a principled approach come together. So, and also the UK really was one of the, and is still one of the first countries really to always tackle emerging issues of violence against women. So whether it's through legislation or policies, like for example, legislating on economic forms of violence, on coercive control, on digitally facilitated violence and so on. But on the other hand, I would say that it has really maybe sabotaged its own efforts, if I can use that phrase, because as we know, violence against women and girls is not a statutory matter, and there is also no clear approach to non-devolved powers and how they impact women and girls on issues particularly relating to immigration, asylum, and just other classical forms of violence, like domestic violence, and so on and so forth. And references to violence against women and girls is very much scattered throughout different pieces of legislation. Perhaps the most clear form of legislation that is relevant is the Equality Act, but everything else is sort of scattered around and sits in different portfolios with different ministries. So in that statement, in fact, I had recommended the UK to adopt a central framework that brings together all the strands relating to violence against women and girls under one roof, and also to strengthen the framing of its policy and legal framework to center it in a human rights framework, and to really give meaning to women's rights are human rights, which I think is still missing. And therefore I also recommended the creation of a ministry for women and equality with a separate cabinet minister and brief. Related to that, I felt very strongly that this cutting of resources to frontline organizations, to services, has to stop. It keeps going on and on, not just in the UK, but also all governments that have austerity measures. And that you need to address the gender bias and the impunity that exists for acts of violence against women and girls, including racism. which we know is quite widespread in a number of institutions, and other forms of discrimination. We must also tackle all aspects of violence together, so avoiding a piecemeal approach, because it's all interconnected. So we have to look at violence in family courts, in prostitution, in pornography, what it means in surrogacy, in prison, in sport, what it means for foreign women in the UK, including asylum seekers and refugees. So we cannot have we cannot do this but not that part, because it all fits together. And we must therefore also be concerned about the safety, dignity and security of all women that are present in the UK, be they nationals or foreign, but also women and girls that are outside of the UK. And the reason I mention this is because, of course, one of the things that the UK leads on is also the way in which it has made gender equality a core focus of its international development efforts. And we know, for example, that the UK was the one that launched this international initiative, right, on preventing sexual violence in conflict. But here again, the UK needs to walk the talk. And by that, I mean, if you look at Palestine, Israel, yes, of course, the UK rightly denounced any acts of sexual violence committed against Israeli women on the 7th of October, but it has failed to show the same outrage with regards to sexual violence committed against Palestinians, including women. And that, frankly, means that as a minimum, there needs to be not just more concerted efforts to reach a ceasefire, but also the imposition of a full arms embargo on Israel, because the majority of those that are being killed in this unfolding genocide, as we know, are women and children. And of course, when it comes to Afghanistan, there needs to be also a lot more pressure in order to reverse this unacceptable denial and erasure of women in Afghanistan, which is clearly a situation of discrimination and violence and gender and sex persecution, I would say, rather than gender persecution. With regards to clarifying the meaning of sex to be biological sex, just perhaps to frame that also within the context of my visit to the UK, back in February, it was very clear that having good disaggregated data was a big challenge that hampered the efforts. And one of the things that is clearly missing is sex also, that is disaggregated alongside sex, and that makes it clear that what we mean when we collect sex data is biological sex. And of course, this is really important because we know that violence against women and girls is male violence against females. And therefore, if we don't collect that kind of data, we lose the understanding of what the issue is. And then we have problems in designing and implementing adequate responses. And then, of course, when it comes to femicide, it's really important that we, in addition to sex, age, gender, disaggregated data, we also collect data that shows clearly the relationship between perpetrator and victim. And that also is missing, and data is collected differently in the different devolved areas, and so it makes comparison very difficult. As I've said, and as also Anna and Sonia have said, I mean, the Equality Act is no doubt really a standard setter in the sense that it was crafted with a lot of foresight when it made sure that sex, sexual orientation, and gender reassignment were three distinct protected characteristics. And I think it also foresaw, to an extent, that there would be clashes or tension that would arise between sex and gender reassignment rights, and allowed exceptions to permit lawful distinction to be made between men and women in limited circumstances. So it would, for example, allow, as was mentioned, running single-sex services in some specific circumstances. However, what we have seen from the UK, but also in other places around the world, is that it's really important to make it very clear what we mean by sex. And that this means actually biological sex. I am aware, of course, of the case before the Supreme Court that will examine on appeal precisely that in the Equality Act, which was brought forward by 4Women Scotland. But I agree also that it doesn't necessarily have to be kicked to the courts, right, in order to have that clarity, because of course courts may look at this, in different ways, or may not take a decision, as Sonia said. So there is no reason in order to defer this only to the courts. When it comes to international human rights law, I've said before, and I continue to reiterate, that while the terms man, woman, or sex were not defined explicitly, if we are to interpret terms in accordance with the ordinary meaning that was given to them, which is what we should do when we look at international treaties, then the only way to understand sex is biological sex. With regards to the CAS review, I have, of course, followed that also and had spoken to this during my visit, but also after. I'm very happy that the UK and all authorities in the UK have now committed to implement the CAS review, and very much agree that, again, the UK led with regards to this review, because it has had a ripple effect and has affected also how other countries that have gender approaches to children that have gender dysphoria or other distresses deal with the issue, and they have become a lot more cautious as a result of the CAS review. So I'm very pleased to see that, and very much also agree that the fact that a large number of children that come seeking or are referred to gender clinics are girls should concern all of us, and is really primarily the reason why I have spoken about this. Because it is very consistent also with what we see from other information, that there is an increasing distress that adolescent girls face, and that I think is brought about also by the increasing sexualization of women and girls, including adolescent girls, through many things, including the normalization of the buying of sexual acts, but also the consumption of pornography, including by adolescent boys. So being female or the femaleness is becoming more difficult to handle, including for our young girls, and may very well be one of the reasons also why girls choose to reject their femaleness. And so we do indeed need to provide the time and space to make full inquiries of the causes of distress, rather than fast-track children under a path of gender transition that begins with puberty blockers often, but results in more permanent changes with long-lasting consequences. And there's been many studies that have shown the actual also negative health consequences of that. So I think children and of course adults, I'm not excluding adults from that, are also have a right to know what they are getting into and the full consequences of the path that they choose, and to be able to make an informed decision. They also, adults that have distresses of that sort, have also a right to the highest standard of mental and physical health. And finally, on therefore conversion therapy bans, I haven't seen the plans by the Labour government. I don't think they are yet spelled out very concretely, but very much also agree that governments in general should not rush to adopt all-encompassing sort of trans-inclusive bans on conversion therapy without considering the wider consequences and harms that that may cause, particularly I would say on children, including girls. And such a ban would make it actually easier to also fast-track children and adults that are same-sex attracted, that may be autistic, that may have other also concerns on path of irreversible medical gender transition. So I will leave it at that, and looking forward to our discussion. Thank you.